I suppose what you could say is, if you're going to say was it quicker or slower, you could say it's quicker to get the same results
Yeah.
as to get to the same level as you would.
But at the same time, you can get lost. If you've got hundreds of plugins, you can spend hours on and we've done it before, on a piano sound. And there's been massive arguments about whether it should be this sound or this sound.
What's the difference between playing live and making a record in the studio?
We just spent about 20 minutes trying to get one note, bob on right. That's the difference. I think just repeating things again and again and again and again.
Obviously, when you play live, you just get one go, and that's what it is. That's what the performance is. When you're in the studio, you can get absolutely lost in the intricacies of the length of the note or the how you pronounce one syllable. So you can spend hours doing what you would do in 2 seconds when you're live.
Which do you prefer?
Live. Definitely. It's a pain in the arse doing it this way.
Depends really. For the adrenaline and stuff live, but in the studio, I do like getting lost in that. Which path can you go down now? It's really quite interesting.
Technology has made recording a quicker, better process, or has it sort of sucked the life out of the whole?
Depends what level you're doing it to, whether it's quicker or not. I mean, you could argue that it's quicker because you have things like plugins, which makes your keyboard sound like a gentleman upright piano or whatever. But you can spend so much time because there are so many options available to you, whereas 10-15 years ago you didn't have as many options.
Yeah, if you're a crap singer or a crap drummer, it doesn't matter, because in a couple of minutes you can sort that. Whereas before, it was that one take and that was it, or it was 10 takes and pick the best one.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be as good, really, to get a good polished recording. You can spend hours on and we've done it before, on a piano sound. And there's been massive arguments about whether it should be this sound or this sound, and there's very little difference in them.
Yeah, you end up just convincing yourself, don't you, that things sound different that actually don't. And then you have arguments about, well, should that piano, the way that these plugins work, should that piano? I preferred it when the piano was in a Swedish gorge. No, I preferred it when it was that plugin when it sounds like it's on the moon. Yeah, but the moon's ridiculous. Nobody would play a piano on the moon, and you end up having these ridiculous conversations.
You think you can get lost in it?
Absolutely. There was the sound of the performance, the sound of the room. That's why in the olden days, I suppose, that one of the reasons that the big studios were so famous is because you got a certain sound from a certain place. And that then became the sound of that place, regardless of who the artist was, and that becomes the famous sound of all these records. Now everything's very, very polished because you don't get as much of the experience of the place that you're in anymore. One of the problems that you can have is doing something and then trying to make it sound better towards the end, and after the process of recording it, and then you don't really know which like I was saying, which path to go down. Traditionally, you would just find something that sounds good. So you would find a piano in the corner of some room and you think, well, my ears tell me that sounds brilliant. So all we need to do is put a microphone in front of it.
Or you'd be limited because that's the only piano you got access to.
Yeah, that's another thing, yeah.
You've been a live band primarily for many, many years. When you record, do you prefer to record in a live context, rather than this kind of the digital age of piecing bits together? Do you do you get the drums in there and do you lay all that down, or how do you work in a studio?
I think we have not recorded like we would have wanted to record because of constraints of space and
under-rehearsed
a lot of the time. Yeah, but we'd always liked the idea of getting the band to the stage where you knew the songs backwards and you don't need to sing a guide vocal or anything, and you can play live because you've got a few different rooms and you got. But we've always just ended up not being able to be in that position. For this recording, that was the plan. We were going to record as live as possible and get it kind of sounds like an old-fashioned concept, but to get a good take and then work on the take. But I mean, we hadn't got a bass player for this.
Yeah.
So we're doing that ourselves. So we couldn't.
I always like the idea of one of my favourite bands, Wilco. One of their albums they did it all in Pro Tools, pieced it all together and cut and chopped it and all did all that, and that was their album. Then they learnt to play that live, and then they did takes of the live performances of that song.
Simon Williams in Runsford kind of was saying to us in terms of getting demos sent to them or whatever, and they'd listen to a demo and go, oh, that's a bloody good recording, it's not a half bad song there or whatever.
Yeah.
And Fierce Panda, they've got regular club nights or whatever, so they go, we'll get this band in and we'll give them a gig with a view to possibly putting a single out by them or whatever. And these kids turn up and they can't play.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It reminds me of what you're saying there. It reminds me of stuff that I really like about listening to the old records, where the mistakes. I mean, it's not quite what you're saying, but the mistakes become part of the record. You don't get that anymore. You don't. I mean, one of the famous ones is "Hey Jude," when you can hear is it George or John at a certain point going, because he makes a mistake, and you hear that in the mix. And every single time that you play "Hey Jude," which is a great song and really famous and sold millions of copies, you hear that little mistake, and that is there for eternity.
Yeah,
you don't get
stuff like coughs and little bits of things. That's proper fan stuff, isn't it?
Little bits of dialogue before they start. There's people insist on using like valve desks, and there's not many studios that have still got valve desks because it sort of colours the sound of the microphones or whatever. To what extent do you think that's true, or is it kind of nonsense? Is it old-fashioned nonsense?
I think the test for that is you if you listen to bands that are still going from those days. So you hear an old Fleetwood Mac album, and then you hear a new Fleetwood Mac album, and it's the same people, and maybe they're a bit more croaky or not as they don't write things that are as cool anymore or as good maybe. But you hear their new albums and they're a bit boring because they're a bit polished. Because they haven't had the studio or the room hasn't dictated what the sound was going to be like, so they end up sounding not as good, I think.
Do you think it matters whether you've worked with a producer or not? I guess you guys you sort of self-produce in that respect.
We do, yeah.
I'd love to work with a producer.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. Like, I properly work with a producer and get them in the rehearsal room and have their opinion from the start. I'd love it, but we've never really had that experience, have we?
We might be too far gone. I mean,
too far gone.
Too long in the tooth. Can you imagine somebody coming now and going, do you know what? You need that middle eight. You need to get rid of that. Not doing that. How about get rid of you?
Do you not do that between yourselves then?
Well, we do. We self-produce, but I just want to, you're talking about kids being not great at bands. I think when sometimes when bands first get into the studio, if they have a good producer, that can transform them into a good band, can't it? Because
Stone Roses for
absolutely.
John Leckie was
perfect example, isn't it?
1/5 of the band, wasn't he?
People expect you to be able to turn a bad performance into a good performance, but even a great performance recorded badly still sounds like a good performance. So I think, even though that's not really